My mother didn't beg me to come home to Aspen for a family reunion. She lured me here to sign my own life away. I'm Jasmine, I'm 30 and I hunt financial criminals for a living. Yet I was stupid enough to walk into this house. The blizzard outside was howling, but the silence in the living room was deadlier. I shook the snow off my coat holding a bottle of vintage wine hoping for a hug. Instead my father Marcus locked the front door behind me and pocketed the key. My mother Eleanor didn't say hello. She just slid a thick legal document across the mahogany table. "Sign it," she said, her voice shaking with fake concern. "It's a voluntary conservatorship. Admit you're mentally unstable, give us control of your assets, and we won't let the loan sharks kill your brother." My brother Caleb sat in the corner, cleaning his fingernails with a hunting knife, smiling. They thought they had trapped a helpless daughter. They forgot they were locking themselves in with a forensic auditor who had already bought their debt. Have you ever realized your family wasn't your safety net, but your predator? Tell me in the comments. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I looked at the 3 pages that were supposed to end my freedom, and I felt a bubble of laughter rise up in my throat. It was a cold, sharp sound that bounced off the high ceilings of the living room. My mother, Eleanor, flinched like I had slapped her. She had expected tears. She had expected the terrified daughter who used to hide in her room while my father raged. She wasn't prepared for the woman who had spent the last decade tearing apart corporate fraud schemes. I walked over to the fireplace where the logs were crackling against the winter chill. "A voluntary conservatorship," I said, my voice steady. "Because I'm emotionally volatile." "That's a nice touch, Mom." I held the document over the flames. The paper curled, blackened, and then caught fire. I dropped it onto the logs and watched my name burn. "You think this is a game?" Marcus barked, stepping forward. He looked older than I remembered, his face puffy from cheap whiskey and expensive stress. "You sign those papers or you don't leave this house. We are trying to save this family." "No," I corrected him. "You're trying to save yourself from the people Caleb owes money to." I walked back to the table, opened my waterproof briefcase and pulled out a single crisp blue folder. I didn't slide it across the table, I slammed it down. The sound cracked like a gunshot. "You forgot what I do for a living, Dad. I don't just audit tax returns. I trace distressed assets. When Caleb's bookie sold his $1.2 million debt to a shell company in the Cayman Islands last week, my system flagged it. I knew you were desperate. I knew you would try to leverage this house to pay it off." Caleb stopped cleaning his nails. The smirk slid off his face. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that the shell company didn't want the debt," I said, locking eyes with him. "So they sold it. To me." I opened the folder to reveal the promissory note, notarized and stamped. "I bought the note yesterday morning. I own Caleb's debt. And since you, Marcus, put this house up as collateral for his business loans 3 years ago, I own the lien on this property." The silence in the room was absolute. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of a predator realizing it just stepped into a trap. "I am not your daughter right now," I said, letting the words hang in the freezing air. "I am your primary creditor. And according to my records, you have missed 3 consecutive payments. As of this morning, I have exercised my right to accelerate the loan." I pulled out the notice of default and tossed it onto the mahogany table. It landed right where the conservatorship papers had been. "You are in default. I am foreclosing on my collateral. You have exactly 60 minutes to pack your personal effects and vacate the premises." I checked my watch. "If you are not out by the time the snow stops, I will have you removed as trespassers. The clock starts now." My mother looked at my father, her eyes wide and terrified. "Marcus," she whispered. "Do something. She can't do this." But I was already sitting down, crossing my legs and watching them panic. They wanted a crazy daughter? Fine. I would show them exactly how crazy I could get when I held the deed to their survival. Marcus didn't yell. He didn't start packing. Instead, he walked over to the wet bar, poured himself 3 fingers of scotch and took a slow, deliberate sip. The panic I expected to see in his eyes was gone, replaced by a cold, glittering amusement that made the hair on my arms stand up. "You always were smart, Jasmine," he said, turning to face me. "But you've been living in London too long. You forgot how things work out here in the West." He pulled his phone from his pocket and tapped the screen a few times before sliding it across the table toward me. It was a PDF of the Colorado Revised Statutes. Specifically, the section on tenant rights and eviction procedures. "You own the debt. Congratulations. You're the bank," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a dangerous purr. "But we are legal residents. We have established tenancy. Do you know what that means, sweetheart? It means you can't just throw us out into a blizzard because you feel like it. You have to give us 30 days written notice. Then you have to file for a court hearing. Then you have to wait for the sheriff to schedule an eviction." He leaned over the table, the smell of expensive scotch and cheap cologne drifting toward me. "That takes time. Usually about 3 months in this county. And do you know what I'm going to do during those 3 months?" I stayed silent, my hand resting near my briefcase. "I am going to strip this house to the studs," he whispered. "I'm going to rip out the copper wiring. I'm going to pour concrete down the plumbing. I'm going to sell every fixture, every appliance, every piece of molding that isn't nailed down. By the time the sheriff finally knocks on that door, your collateral will be a hollow shell worth less than the dirt it sits on. My stomach tightened. He was right. Possession was the only law that mattered right now, and he had it. I had the financial leverage, but he had the physical ground. I had underestimated just how much my father enjoyed burning things down if he couldn't control them. So here is the new deal, Marcus said, straightening up. You're going to sit back down. You are going to sign those conservatorship papers. You are going to transfer the deed back to me to manage your assets. And if you do that, maybe I won't ruin you. And if I leave? I asked, standing up. Marcus didn't answer. He just nodded at Caleb. My brother moved with a speed I hadn't expected. He lunged for the front door, but he didn't open it. He slammed the heavy deadbolt home and turned the privacy lock. Then he pocketed the key and leaned against the wood, crossing his arms. The knife was still in his hand, idly tapping against his thigh. You're not leaving, Caleb said, his grin returning. Roads are closed, sis. Blizzard conditions. It wouldn't be safe. Eleanor stood up, wiping her fake tears. She moved to the landline on the kitchen counter, her hand hovering over the receiver. We're just worried about you, Jasmine, she said, her voice dripping with that sick, sweet poison. You seem so unstable. If you try to run out into this storm, we might have to call for help. We might have to tell them you're a danger to yourself. I looked from the locked door to the burning fireplace. The trap had snapped shut. They weren't just trying to steal my money anymore. They were holding me hostage in the house I paid for. They thought they had checkmated me with property law and brute force. But Marcus had made one critical mistake. He assumed I was playing by the rules of a landlord. He forgot that I didn't come here to be a landlord. I came here to be an auditor. And auditors always check the fine print. I stood there, surrounded by the smell of wood smoke and expensive scotch, and I looked at them. Really looked at them. For years I had seen my family through a lens of guilt. I thought they were just bad with money. I thought they were just unlucky. But staring at Caleb guarding the door like a prison warden, the lens cracked. They weren't unlucky. They were cannibals. I looked at my mother's hands, clutching the landline. Those same manicured hands had forged my signature on a $50,000 business loan when I was 22. I found out when I tried to rent my first apartment and got rejected for a credit score that looked like a temperature reading. I spent 3 years eating instant noodles and working double shifts to pay off a luxury sedan I never drove, while they told me I was being selfish for complaining. They broke my financial spine before I even learned to walk. But they didn't know that while I was paying off their fraud, I was learning how to detect it. They created a forensic auditor to fix their messes, and now they were surprised that I was auditing them. 1.2 million, I said softly. Caleb laughed, spinning the knife on his palm. Yeah. Big number, right? Dad said you could afford it. Said you were making bank in London. It wasn't just a number. That money was my life. It was the retirement I hadn't saved for. It was the house I hadn't bought. It was 10 years of missed holidays and overtime shifts, condensed into a gambling debt for a brother who had never worked a real job in his life. They were willing to lock me in this house and gaslight me into an asylum just to keep the cash flow running. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. It was a hostage situation. And in a hostage situation, you don't negotiate with the terrorists. You find the structural weakness in the building and you bring the roof down. My eyes drifted past Marcus's smug face to the wall behind him. He loved his trophies. There were mounted antlers, photos of him shaking hands with local politicians, and right in the center, framed in gold, was his pride and joy, the business license. Marcus had always been obsessed with tax write-offs. He bragged about it constantly. Why pay the government when you can pay yourself? I squinted at the framed document. Peak altitude hospitality, LC. The gears in my head clicked into place. The adrenaline that had been making my hands shake suddenly turned cold and sharp. Marcus was right about tenant law. Tenants have rights. Tenants need eviction notices. Tenants are protected. But businesses? Businesses are different. And employees caught stealing from the company don't get 30 days notice. They get escorted out by security. Marcus thought he was shielding himself with property law. But he had been so greedy, so desperate to save $15,000 a year in property taxes, that he had inadvertently built a trap door right under his own feet. I looked back at my father. He was pouring another drink, confident that he had won, confident that the blizzard and the deadbolt gave him total control. He didn't see the predator in the room anymore. He just saw his daughter. You're right, Dad, I said, my voice dropping an octave, stripping away the fear. Tenant law is very specific. I walked back to my chair and sat down. I opened my laptop. But you forgot one thing, I murmured as I logged into the county database. Greed always leaves a paper trail. Marcus frowned, the glass halting halfway to his mouth. What are you doing? I'm checking your employment status, I said. And I hit enter. Marcus watched me type, a smug satisfaction settling over his features. He thought I was transferring the deed back to him. He thought he had bullied me into submission with a deadbolt and a PDF file. He took a sip of his scotch, the ice clinking against the glass like a victory bell. Smart girl, he said, his voice thick with condescension. I knew you'd see reason. Family helps family, right? Just put the confirmation number on the table when you're done. I'm not on my banking app, Dad, I said, not looking up from the screen. I'm on the Pitkin County Assessor's portal. Marcus froze. Why? Because I wanted to double-check that statute you showed me. Colorado Tenant Law 134107. You were absolutely right. A primary resident in a residential home requires a 30-day notice for eviction. It's ironclad. I turned the laptop around so the screen faced him. The glow illuminated the sudden pallor of his skin. But this isn't a residential home, is it? I pointed to the filing status at the top of the page. Commercial property. Classification, short-term corporate rental. I stood up, walking around the table until I was standing right next to him. I could smell the fear radiating off him now, sharper than the whiskey. You were always so proud of your tax hacks, Marcus. You bragged about saving $15,000 a year in property taxes by registering this place as a business. You told the IRS this wasn't your home, it was a hotel. Peak Altitude Hospitality, LC. That's the legal owner of this building. Caleb stepped away from the door, the knife lowering slightly. Dad? What is she talking about? I'm talking about your employment status, I said, scrolling down to the payroll declaration. To claim the maximum deduction, you didn't list yourselves as tenants. You listed yourselves as on-site maintenance staff. At-will employees. Living on the premises as a condition of employment. Marcus slammed his glass down. It's just paperwork. It doesn't mean anything. In a court of law, paperwork is everything, I snapped. And here is the beautiful part about Colorado labor law. When an employee living on company property is terminated for cause, say for theft, embezzlement, or hostile behavior, their right of occupancy ends immediately. Not in 30 days. Not in 24 hours. The moment the employment contract is severed, they become trespassers. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out 3 pre-typed letters. I had prepared them for a different scenario, but they worked perfectly now. I signed them with a flourish. You tried to hide behind tenant rights, but you were too greedy to pay the premium for them, I said, sliding the papers across the table. You want it to be a business? Fine. I am the majority shareholder of the debt that owns this company. And as of this moment, your employment is terminated effective immediately. I looked Marcus dead in the eye. You're fired. Get off my property. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. The wind howled outside, but inside the air was sucked out of the room. Marcus looked at the papers, then at the locked door, then at me. His legal shield had just evaporated. He wasn't a protected tenant anymore. He was a disgruntled ex-employee refusing to leave a corporate facility. You can't do this, Eleanor whispered, her voice trembling. It's a blizzard. We'll freeze. Then you should have thought about that before you tried to lock me in here and steal my life, I said coldly. You have 10 minutes to pack a bag. If you're not out, I call the sheriff. And unlike you, I have the deed, the tax records, and the termination notice to prove I belong here. I thought I had one. I thought the logic, the law, and the sheer absurdity of their own greed trapping them would force them to surrender. I thought they would fold. But I made the classic mistake of a rational person fighting irrational people. I assumed they wanted to survive. I didn't realize that for a narcissist like my mother, survival was secondary to control. If she couldn't control me, she would destroy me. Even if it meant burning the whole world down with us. Marcus looked at Eleanor. He didn't say a word. He just gave a barely perceptible nod. And the room shifted from a legal battlefield to a kill box. Marcus didn't lunge across the table. He didn't try to tear up the termination letters. He just looked at them, and for a second I saw the calculation behind his eyes. The math had changed. He couldn't win legally. He couldn't win financially. So he decided to flip the board. A slight tilt of his head, barely noticeable, was all it took. After 40 years of toxic codependency, Eleanor understood the signal perfectly. Destroy everything. She stopped crying instantly. The shaking victim vanished, replaced by a cold, focused calm. She grabbed the landline she had been guarding, her thumb poised over the keypad. You think you can fire us? She whispered, her voice suddenly flat. You think you can take my house? I gave you life. I can take it back. She dialed. 3 digits. I stood, realizing too late that contracts meant nothing now. Mom put the phone down. She didn't look at me, she looked through me, and then she screamed. Not fear. Performance. 911. Help. My daughter has a gun. He's shooting. She's going to kill us. She tore at her hair, knocked over a vase to stage a struggle. She's psychotic. Off her meds. Send everyone. My blood went cold. I don't have a gun. She slammed the phone down, eyes glittering with triumph. Let's see your tax loopholes, explain an active shooter. This was an extinction burst. The moment a narcissist, stripped of control, chooses annihilation over irrelevance. If she couldn't own me, she would rather see me destroyed. Blue and red lights flooded the snow outside. Aspen police response time for the wealthy was fast. A bullhorn boomed. Pitkin County Sheriff's Office. Jasmine Sterling, come out with your hands visible. Caleb laughed. You're done. Either cuffs or a body bag. The paperwork on the table meant nothing. Truth doesn't stop bullets. They thought it was checkmate, until Marcus's paranoia betrayed him. 6 months earlier he'd installed a full interior surveillance system. He forgot one thing. I had set the Wi-Fi password. I raised my hands, then tapped my smartwatch. Dispatch, I said calmly. This is Jasmine Sterling. Federal contractor. Hostage status. I am broadcasting a secure live feed from the home's interior cameras. Access code Alpha 9 Victor. Marcus froze. Outside the tone changed. Hold fire. We have eyes inside. Suspect is unarmed. Hostiles are the male subjects. The door exploded inward. Officers stormed the house, not toward me but toward them. Marcus and Caleb were taken down. Eleanor's landline slipped from her hands. The sheriff played back the footage. Eleanor screaming about guns while alone, casually staging the scene. False reporting an active shooter is a Class 4 felony, he said. Cuff her. As they dragged her out, she screamed my name. I already told them the truth, I said quietly. You just didn't think anyone was watching. An hour later, the house was silent. I ordered it sold. The money went into an irrevocable trust for Caleb's abandoned children, cutting the toxic line completely. Standing in the cold, I understood something simple and final. Family isn't a suicide pact. I lost my family that night. But I saved my life. 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 But I saved my